Singing. Hey everyone, this is Jake, audio engineer at AMS and resident bass nerd. I'm here today with Mr. Andy Fuchs. So Andy, this is not your first foray into bass amps. This is kind of came out of a prototype, you said.
Well, yeah, we had a couple of prototypes clunking around the shop, and I would get occasional bass gigs. I'm primarily a guitar player now. I would take them out on gigs, and I liked them. I took them to a couple of NAMM shows. The response was great in the booth. Often at NAMM at night, somebody will come by and say, hey, can I borrow an amp for a show? So we sent some bass amps out, and some heavyweights really liked what we did. You know, unfortunately, things like most of the world got delayed with the pandemic. Right. I got some new hires in the shop after the pandemic, one of which was Scott DeBockler, who is my production supervisor, and he's a terrific packaging engineer. We took some of my prototypes, took them apart, and figured out that with modern power amp technology, like the Ice Power module, we could make them small and light, and we could also do away with the wooden cabinet, which is not only a cost factor, but a weight factor as well. Right. So these are literally the lowest priced amps in our lineup, because Fuchs is known for, you know, $1,800, $2,000 and up to $5,000, $6,000 amps.
Boutique amps, yeah.
And this is, you know, this is a much more affordable price range as well. And that's due in part because they're a quick assembly, minimum of moving parts, and they've done very well for us. So we're excited about them.
Yes, and they're much lighter than their counterparts, at least this version right here, the SVT inspired tube version.
Yes, this is a big 6, maybe 7 pounds in the box, as opposed to 80 pounds of an SVT. So you don't have big output and power transformers, which is awesome. And you also don't have the $600 retubing charge when an SVT decides it needs new tubes.
Oh yeah.
So that you know, these are almost, we told that to a customer last week, you know, you could pretty much replace the amp for a couple of bucks more and never have to buy power tubes again.
There you go. And it's not just this one that's loud. I mean, we turned this one on before. You could see our volumes are basically 0, and we are blowing the roof off already. So
yeah, there's a lot of gain available. The input gain is actually a gain pot. It's not a volume pot,
right?
Which allows you to adjust for an active bass or a passive bass. And then you've got an output master volume. And not unlike a guitar amp, if you turn up the preamp volume and turn down the master, you can get a dirty tone. Right. If you go the other way around with the input gain lowered and the output master up, it's loud and clear.
Yeah, nice and transparent.
Absolutely.
Speaking of transparency, that is not what we're doing today, because we have a lot of EQ to treat this active bass. I put it in passive mode, and let's hear a little bit of it with this this EQ that we have going on.
Sure.
Sounds great.
It does.
Fantastic. And that's how we have it set right here on the left side, with our highs and our lows a little bit boosted.
Right, this is a 210 box, so we pushed the lows up a little bit, tiny little bit of sparkle on top. We put a little bit of a mid notch in here. What you have on the mid, the active mid knob, if it's straight up, is flat completely out of the circuit. And then if you turn downward to the left, you get a cut. To the right, you get a boost, and then you have a secondary control that adjusts the frequency at which that happens. But if this is set flat, you're basically your ceiling in volume, bass, and treble. Very simple and straightforward, and very, very low coloration.
Great. And one feature that I wish everyone would put on a bass amp that I love on this is the DI phase switch. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. As a player who's worked live, with front of house systems, a very commonly forgotten aspect of bass is it tends to cancel out really, really well if you've got a bass rig that's out of phase with your mains. There's a weird spot. Sometimes the audience hears it. Very often the bass player hears it. There's sort of a null spot where the bass just disappears, where the two speakers meet. And if they're out of phase, you sort of suck out that, that frequency at which they're beating off each other.
Right, exactly.
When I spoke to a front of house guy, I said, how do you deal with that? He goes, well, he actually built a box to flip the phase. I'm like, that's really clever. And I'm thinking, for what it would take to integrate that into an amp, it's silly not to have it.
Right.
It's got the more common DI output. It's got a ground lift in the event you got a noise issue. And you also have a choice of picking your signal pre, which is basically straight from the bass with buffering, or post, which is after the tone stack, which is, of course, great in the studio.
That's how I want it. Yeah, that's how I want to hear it. Because you could use this just as a preamp. Even though it's loud as ever, you could just use the preamp sound, run it straight into your recording desk if that's how you wanted to do it.
Yep. Absolutely. Take your loop output, just mute the amp itself using the mute switch, and take your return out right into your mixing board or your interface.
So on the left we have the solid state version. On the right we have the tube.
Right.
The tube is based on the famous SVT circuit that we mentioned. But tell us a little bit about where you got the inspiration for the solid state circuit.
Well, I went to a gig one night, jazz guitar gig in my area in North Jersey, and I met a bass player named Steve Laspina, who was using a Walter Woods, and he said, I wish like heck I could get this thing repaired. I got some noisy pots and some funky switches. I said, well, I'll take a look at it. And for years, Walter Woods amps were iconic.
Right.
Upright bass players loved them. Even jazz guitar players liked them because they were warm and really light.
Super clean, transparent sound.
Absolutely. So I cleaned up Steve's amp, got it working real well, and I was really impressed with it. To the point that I sort of reverse engineered the preamp portion. Walter's power amp was very unique in the 70s. It was one of the first switch mode digital amps, which was very clever at the time. And he covered all the transistor numbers with epoxy, and he made it sort of very secretive. But the preamp was exposed for all to see. So I took a couple of nights of measuring resistors and tracing out circuits, came up with a working Woods preamp, and I mated it with the modernized power module. I've since chased down a few bass players that used Walter Woods amps, whether working or not, because a number of them died and I couldn't fix them. And Walter's
most are very old
MIA.
Production, yeah.
So, I loaned them out, and it ended up being like, how much is this? Oh, I'm going to get one. And a number of local North Jersey guys picked them up and grabbed them and embraced them and love them, which is great. I took one into the city a couple of weeks back, and Will Lee wouldn't let me take it home. So that felt real good.
Well, you're now at -1 on those Walter Woods amps, huh?
Yeah. Well, the
but
initial,
you have this now.
The initial response was great. And then I said, he said, this is a good amp. I like this. He goes, tell me about your tube one. And I said, well, I explained what it did. And he goes, I'd like to hear that the next time. I'm like, okay, great. So I brought that in. And just like this, we set him up. And he said, this is a good amp. That's a great amp.
That's why you had it in your car.
Dumb luck, right? So it's been very well received, and it's got the SVT organic musical preamp sound, and it's got the tone controls work identically to an SVT, but without all that annoying weight. Right. I mean, it's 6 or 7 pounds versus 80, and you'll never put power tubes into it again. Into a little less than 3 ohms. If you go to 2.6 ohms, which is an 8 ohm and 4 ohm cabinet together, it puts out almost 1,000 watts. We rate them at 350 and 700.
I believe it though.
But it'll move some air.
Yeah, from what I heard, absolutely. So besides the difference in preamps, and obviously that we have the 300 and 700 versions, the DI and the power stage are identical in both these amps.
Yeah, they basically, from the midpoint of the circuit board on, they're identical. You have a very sharp cutoff subsonic filter in there, so there's no cone flap.
Right.
Imported enclosures and stuff. It always bothered me when I played bass to turn around and see my speakers jumping around like crazy. A lot of that is wasted energy and wasted power. So if you roll off a bass amp at about 28 hertz and you roll it off very sharply, you're not going to lose the low end punch that a bass has, but what you are going to lose is power that you're wasting on stuff nobody hears.
That unnecessary energy.
So,
Absolutely.
so they're all running the same subsonic filter in all 4 models. The DI output circuitry is the same. It's transformerless. It's balanced, low impedance output. The tube unit has a 30-second delay on the audio while the tubes warm up, so you don't turn it on and get any funky sounds and stuff, pops or noises or anything. But that's about it. The loop is the same. It's a line level, series only loop built onto the front. You know, so all your patching and stuff is in front, and that was done intentionally to keep the noise floor very low. We didn't run much audio to the back of the amp other than the input to the power module.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
We're not near the power supply. We're not near the AC power plug. All strictly in front of the box, which is separated by a metal shield.
And speaking of the AC power plug, this can go around the world as well, right?
Universal AC. You bring it to Europe and plug it in, it turns on happily. It knows where it is. Same thing in Japan at 100 volts, the US at 120. It's an automatic line setting all the way up to, I think it's 260 in Australia or 250.
Really?
Yeah, they got a weird number over there, but this is compatible globally.
So we just heard a bunch of the solid state version of the amp. Why don't we hook into the tube version and listen to that a little bit?
Got a little bit more like natural drive to it, a little less
Oh yeah.
clean and musical.
Well, you can do, if you do this.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you passive right now?
Yeah. Oof. I know, crazy, right?
You should try it active as well, because it responds well to that.
Let us do that. Nice. Singing. Sounding great.
Thank you.
So both these amps are out right now. The cabs are on their way.
Yes. The biggest project coming out now is going to be cabinets next. We're doing a 210, 112, 110. I've actually got a 12 and a 10 in a cabinet. That's a non-Neo. The 12's a coax, so it's got a horn in the middle.
Right.
Plus a 10. But they're all going to mostly be Neo, and they're going to be made out of light ply, so they'll be real light. This is a one-hand lift.
Absolutely.
Ported. Assembled in the U.S., premium parts all the way, Penn Elcom hardware. This is rhino hide covering like they use on truck beds, so you can leave it out in the rain or beat it up in the trunk of your car, and you don't have to worry about tearing a Tolex or anything like that.
Right, heavy duty, but still sounds like a, top tier bass cab.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. They're all treated internally with cotton batting on the inside. They're all properly ported for the drivers that we're using. The back will be a combination of speak-ons and 1/4-inch plugs, 2 in, 2 out, and solid metal grills. They should wear well. This cabinet's been banging around over 5 years, and we finally got the wheels turning on getting them made. We're making them locally too.
That's great.
Yeah,
great to hear.
Trying to eliminate having to ship them. That's a cost, and we want to pass that on to the consumer.
Absolutely.
Make a good cabinet more affordable.
And what else do we have on the horizon for Fuchs?
By popular demand, we're going to be doing a guitar amp in this platform. It's going to be a hybrid. It's going to be using a 300-watt ICE power module, so it'll be 150 into 8 ohms, 300 watts into 4 ohms. We're only going to make that one in a 300. No guitarist deserves 700 watts.
No.
It's basically going to be our ODS preamp using tubes.
Great.
We've got a kind of unique circuit in there to make the amp clip like a tube amp, because you really don't want to overload an ice power module with a guitar.
Right.
Trust me, I've done it. It doesn't sound good and it eats speakers. So we've got a compressor circuit actually using a tube that will limit the power of the amp right at clipping, so that you'll never get the module to clip and it'll sound like a tube amp.
Right.
So in this platform, you'll have an ODS preamp, our digital reverb, which we've been making now over 5 years. Everybody loves it. Studio grade, super quiet, super good sounding. And a lot of the features that are in this, front panel loop, there'll be presence and resonance controls as well, volume, bass, mid, treble, overdrive tone control, reverb level control, loop up on the front. It's basically going to bring this platform into the guitar realm.
Fantastic. Looking forward to those.
Oh yeah. These 4 bass amps are available at American Musical Supply in the 300 and 700 watt tube and solid state versions for immediate delivery, and they offer financing too.
AmericanMusical.com.